The Great Hall of Luminara Prime was filled with thousands of alien faces. They came from 347 different species. Some had scales. Some had fur. Some had no bodies at all and floated like clouds of light. They all sat in a massive circle that rose up like a bowl turned inside out. In the center, standing alone on a small platform, was a single human. His name was Kong Hyun. He was 62 years old with gray hair and a calm face. He wore a simple black suit. No medals. No fancy clothes. Just a man standing before the judgment of an entire galaxy. For 300 years, Earth had been part of the Galactic Assembly. But they were never truly welcome. The other species called humans the young ones or the violent children. They feared how fast humans learned. They whispered about human wars and human weapons. They worried that one day, humans would become too powerful to control. Today, they had decided to do something about it. High Arbiter Vaughn stood at the highest seat in the chamber. He was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and forearms. His species, the Pelani, had ruled the assembly for 8,000 years. When he spoke, his voice echoed through every translator in the room. The vote is complete, Vaughn announced. 298 species vote in favor. 41 vote against. 8 choose not to vote. The motion passes. A wave of murmurs spread through the hall. Some aliens looked relieved. Others looked worried. A few looked ashamed. Vaughn continued. By the power of this assembly, Earth is hereby exiled from galactic space. All human vessels must leave beyond the boundary line within 30 solar cycles. Humans may not trade with assembly members. Humans may not travel through assembly space. Any human found within our borders after 30 cycles will be arrested and imprisoned. He paused and looked down at the small figure standing alone below. Ambassador Kong, do you have anything to say? Every eye in the chamber turned to Hyun. They expected anger. They expected begging. They expected tears or threats or desperate arguments. Humans were emotional creatures. Everyone knew this. But Hyun simply smiled. It was a small smile. Gentle, even. Like a grandfather watching children play a game they did not understand. He bowed his head slightly, turned, and walked out of the chamber without saying a single word. The aliens watched him go in confused silence. Something felt wrong, but none of them could say what. 12,000 light-years away, on a planet called Earth, Admiral Park Day watched the broadcast on a large screen. He sat in a dark room deep underground, beneath the city of Seoul. This was United Fleet Command, the most secret military base on the planet. Day was a large man with broad shoulders and a scarred face. He had fought in 3 wars and commanded ships across 2 star systems. But today, he simply sat and watched. Beside him stood Commander Lee Nari. She was younger than him, with sharp eyes and short black hair. She was the head of all intelligence operations for Earth. She knew secrets that could destroy governments. The vote is done, Nari said. 298 to 41. Exactly as we predicted. Day nodded slowly. And our transmission? Sent 47 minutes before the vote ended. Every relay station in the galaxy recorded it. Timestamped and verified by 17 neutral systems. Day allowed himself a small laugh. It was not a happy sound. They think they just kicked us out of their little club. They have no idea what they have done. On the screen, alien politicians celebrated their victory. They shook hands and tentacles and other limbs. They congratulated each other on finally dealing with the human problem. After 3 centuries, they had removed the threat. Or so they thought. Nari handed Day a datapad. On it was a document written in every language in the galaxy. The title was simple, Declaration of War. By the time they read this, Nari said, they will realize the truth. We did not wait for their vote. We did not accept their judgment. We resigned from the assembly 47 minutes before they could exile us.
And, under their own laws, Day continued, a member state that declares war cannot be exiled.
They can only be fought.
Yes, sir.
They wanted to throw us out.
Instead, they started a war they do not understand.
Day stood up and walked to a window.
Outside, hidden in the mountains of Korea, were shipyards that officially did not exist. For 50 years, they had been building a fleet in secret. Ships designed with stolen technology, improved beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen.
Weapons that could crack planets. Engines that could cross the galaxy in days instead of weeks. The aliens thought humans were primitive.
They thought humans needed another 1,000 years to catch up.
They were wrong. How long until they figure it out? Day asked. Their legal experts will need about 6 hours to confirm the timeline. After that, they will panic. Good. Day turned back to face her. Begin Phase 1. Recall all human citizens from galactic space. Activate the sleeper networks. And send word to Ambassador Kong. What message, sir? Tell him, well done. Come home.
The real work begins now. On Luminara Prime, Kang Hyun walked through the corridors of the station toward the human embassy. Alien faces watched him pass.
Some looked smug. Some looked pitiful.
They saw a defeated man returning to pack his bags and leave. They did not see the communicator hidden in his ear. They did not hear the message that came through, Phase 1 is active.
All assets moving. Welcome to the war, Ambassador.
Hyun kept walking, his face calm and empty.
Inside, his heart was pounding. Not with fear. With excitement.
For 200 years, humanity had prepared for this moment. They had smiled and bowed and accepted insults. They had let the aliens believe humans were weak and foolish. They had hidden their true strength and waited. Now the waiting was over. By the time the galaxy understood what was happening, it would be far too late.
The exile vote was not humanity's defeat. It was their invitation to finally stop pretending. Behind him, the alien delegates continued their celebration.
They raised glasses and made speeches about peace and safety. They had no idea that in 47 minutes, their entire universe had changed. Earth was not exiled. Earth had declared war. And Earth had been ready for this war longer than most of these species had been traveling among the stars.
The game was only beginning. And humanity intended to win. The news spread through the galaxy like fire through dry grass.
Within 6 hours of the exile vote, every species knew the truth. Earth had not been exiled. Earth had declared war first.
On the capital world of the Pelani Empire, legal experts worked through the night.
They checked the timestamps again and again. They ran the numbers through every computer they had.
The answer was always the same. The human declaration of war arrived 47 minutes before the exile vote was finalized.
Under galactic law, this changed everything. An exile was a punishment for a member state. But Earth was no longer a member state when the vote ended.
They had already left. They had already declared themselves enemies.
High Arbiter Vaughn stood in his private chamber, reading the human document for the 10th time. His 4 hands were shaking.
This cannot be right, he whispered. They could not have known. We kept the vote secret until the last moment. His advisor, a small creature named Brel, shook his head.
They knew, Arbiter. They knew the exact time the vote would end. They knew how many species would vote against them.
They planned this. Planned what? Their own destruction? We have 300 species against them. They have one world.
Brel was quiet for a long moment. Arbiter, I have been studying humans for 40 years.
They do not think like us. They do not see war the way we do. What do you mean? We see war as a last option. Something to avoid. Something shameful. Brel looked up at Vaughn with fear in his eyes. Humans see war as a tool. They have been fighting each other for their entire history. They are very, very good at it.
Vaughn felt cold despite the warm room.
What are you saying? I am saying that if they declared war first, they did it for a reason. They wanted this. They prepared for this. And that terrifies me more than anything. Far across the galaxy, on the trade world of HFY, the human population was leaving. Thousands of freighters and transport ships lifted off every hour. Families carried their belongings.
Merchants closed their shops.
Scientists packed their laboratories. Dr. Yoon Hannah was one of the last to leave. She was a xenohistorian, a scientist who studied alien cultures.
She had lived on HFY for 15 years. She had friends here.
A life here. Now she was walking away from all of it. Her Torani colleague, Scholar Mott, caught her at the spaceport.
He was a round creature covered in brown fur, with 6 small eyes that blinked in confusion.
Hannah, please, Mott begged. Tell me what is happening. Why would your people do this? Declare war against everyone? It is suicide. Hannah stopped walking. She looked at her old friend with something like pity. Do you remember, she said slowly, when I first came here? You asked me why humans always looked so tired. So stressed. So worried. I remember. You said it was because humans never feel safe. That is right. We never feel safe because we know the truth about the universe. The strong eat the weak. The powerful crush the helpless. It has always been this way. But the assembly brought peace, Mott protested. 3,000 years without major war. Peace for you, Hannah said. Not for us. For 300 years, we watched and waited. We saw how other young species were treated. The Ven were absorbed into the Pelani Empire.
The Kos were stripped of their technology.
The Mora were made into servants. She shook her head. We knew that one day, you would come for us too. So you started a war to prevent a war? No, Mott. We started a war we can win to prevent a war we would lose. There is a difference.
She turned and walked toward her ship.
Mott called after her. Hannah. How can you possibly win against the entire galaxy?
She paused at the boarding ramp and looked back one last time.
Because we have been getting ready for 200 years. And you have not been getting ready at all. The ship lifted off and disappeared into the sky. Mott stood alone in the empty spaceport, surrounded by abandoned shops and silent streets. For the first time in his lone life, he felt truly afraid. In the dark spaces between stars, things were moving. Human ships that should not exist slipped out of hidden bases. They had been built in asteroid fields and empty moons, far from alien eyes. Each ship was small but deadly, designed for speed and surprise. Admiral Park Day commanded the 1st Expeditionary Force from his flagship, the Horizon. Around him, 200 warships waited in the darkness. Their engines were cold. Their weapons were hot. They were ready. Commander Lee Nari appeared on his viewscreen from Earth. Sir, intelligence reports are coming in. The assembly is in chaos. They cannot agree on what to do. How long until they send a fleet? Estimates say 3 to 5 days. They will probably send a peacekeeping force first. Something to secure the boundary line and look strong. Day smiled grimly. Peacekeeping force. They still think this is a political problem. They think they can scare us into surrender. What are your orders, sir? We wait. Let them come to us. Let them think they are in control. He leaned forward in his chair. And, when they arrive at the boundary line expecting refugees, they will find us instead. Understood, sir. What about our people still in galactic space? The evacuation is 90% complete. The last ships will be out within 48 hours.
after that, anyone left behind will have to survive on their own.
Nari nodded. There is one more thing, sir. Our sleeper agents are reporting strange activity. Several assembly species are quietly moving their own assets. Ships, money, important people. It seems some of them are preparing for the worst. Good. Fear is useful. The more they doubt each other, the weaker they become. Sir, do you really think we can win this? One planet against 300 species? Day was quiet for a moment.
Behind him, through the viewport, stars glittered in the endless dark. When I was a young officer, he said slowly, my grandfather told me a story. Long ago, a small country called Korea was invaded by a massive empire.
Everyone said Korea would fall in weeks. But Korea did not fall.
They fought for years. They used every trick, every weapon, every advantage they could find.
And, in the end, the empire retreated. We are not fighting one empire, sir. We are fighting a galaxy. True. But the principle is the same. We do not need to conquer them.
We do not need to destroy them. We only need to make victory too expensive for them to afford. He turned to face her directly.
They have numbers.
They have resources.
But they do not have will. They do not have unity.
And they do not have 2 centuries of preparation.
They have never faced an enemy like us. No, Day agreed. They have not.
And, by the time they understand what that means, this war will already be decided. He cut the transmission and turned back to the stars.
Somewhere out there, an alien fleet was gathering.
They thought they were coming to punish a disobedient child. They had no idea they were walking into a trap 200 years in the making.
The galaxy had voted to exile Earth.
Now Earth would teach them why that was a mistake. The Galactic Peacekeeping Fleet arrived at the boundary line on the 5th day after the declaration of war.
200 ships from 12 different species flew in perfect formation.
Their flags and symbols covered their hulls like badges of honor.
They were proud. They were confident. They were completely unprepared. Fleet Commander Tosk stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Light.
He was a Pelani warrior, veteran of 3 border conflicts and 2 police actions. He had never lost a battle.
Scan the area, he ordered. Find any human ships trying to flee.
His sensor officer worked the controls. Sir, I am detecting some engine signatures near the 4th planet.
Very faint. Could be civilian transports. Move to intercept. These humans need to learn that running is pointless.
The fleet changed course and accelerated toward the planet.
Tosk watched the distance numbers count down on his display. 50,000 kilometers. 40,000. 30,000.
Sir, the sensor officer said, his voice suddenly worried.
The signatures are changing. They are not civilian transports. What are they?
Before anyone could answer, space itself seemed to tear open. Ships appeared from nowhere, dropping out of faster-than-light travel at impossibly close range. Not 10 ships.
Not 50.
200 warships, black as night, covered in weapons that glowed with hungry light.
All ships, raise shields. Tosk screamed. Battle formation. Too late. The human fleet fired as one. Not random shots. Not suppressing fire. Every weapon found a target. Every beam hit a weak point. Shield generators exploded. Engine rooms burst into flame. Command bridges went dark.
Captain Shin Tae commanded the destroyer Indomitable from the front of the human formation. He was a thin man with calm eyes and steady hands. He had trained for this moment his entire life. All ships, execute Pattern 7, he ordered.
Focus fire on their flagship. Cut the head off the snake.
The Indomitable dove toward the Eternal Light like a hunting bird.
Alien point defense weapons tried to track it, but the human ship moved too fast, changed direction too quickly.
It was not flying like any ship Tosk had ever seen.
How are they doing that? Tosk demanded. No ship can maneuver like that.
His weapons officer fired desperately, but every shot missed. The human ship twisted and rolled, always one step ahead. Then, it fired. A single beam of white light punched through the Eternal Light's shields like they were made of paper.
It cut through 3 decks and destroyed the main reactor.
Emergency lights flickered on as the great ship began to die. Tosk grabbed his command chair as the floor tilted beneath him. Around him, his officers screamed and fell.
Fires broke out everywhere.
The smell of burning metal filled the air. "Get me a damage report," he shouted.
"Someone tell me what is happening."
But his communications were dead. His sensors were blind. He was alone in the chaos, watching his fleet die through cracked windows.
Outside, it was a massacre.
Human ships moved through the galactic fleet like wolves through sheep.
They did not fight in lines or formations.
They attacked in groups of 3 or 4, hitting weak points and moving on before anyone could respond.
They seemed to know exactly where every alien ship would be, what every captain would do. In 11 minutes, it was over. Of 200 galactic ships, 147 were destroyed. 38 were captured.
15 managed to flee into faster-than-light travel, damaged and terrified. The human fleet lost 6 ships and 212 personnel. Captain Shinte stood on his bridge and watched the wreckage drift past.
Escape pods dotted the darkness, filled with survivors waiting for rescue. He felt no joy in the victory.
Only grim satisfaction. "Send rescue teams for the escape pods," he ordered. "All survivors are to be treated with respect.
Feed them. Heal them.
Then, send them home." His first officer looked surprised.
"Sir? We are letting them go?"
"Yes.
I want them to tell everyone what they saw today. Fear is a weapon too."
Among the survivors was Lieutenant Kree, a young Pelani officer who had been serving on a supply ship.
His vessel was destroyed in the first 30 seconds of battle. He spent 4 hours floating in an escape pod, watching the impossible happen.
When human soldiers cut open his pod and pulled him out, he expected torture.
Expected prison. Expected death.
Instead, they gave him water and wrapped a blanket around his shoulders. A human medic treated a cut on his head with gentle hands.
"Why?" Kree asked in broken common. "Why you help me? We are enemies."
The medic, a young woman named Kim Yuna, looked at him with soft eyes.
"Because you are not our enemy. Your leaders are our enemy.
Your politicians voted to exile us.
You are just a soldier following orders. Same as us." Kree did not understand.
In galactic wars, prisoners were slaves or bargaining chips. They were not treated with kindness.
They were not healed and fed and sent home.
When Kree finally returned to Pelani space, he told everyone what he had seen. The impossible speed of the human ships. The perfect coordination. The strange mercy after battle. Military experts debriefed him for hours, trying to understand. "They knew where we would be," Kree kept saying.
"They knew what we would do. They knew everything."
On Earth, the news of victory arrived in the middle of the night.
President Baek-Soo stood in her office, reading the casualty reports. 6 ships. 212 lives.
For the first battle of a galactic war, it was almost nothing.
Almost. Her advisor entered quietly. "Madam President, the Assembly is demanding to speak with you. They want to negotiate." "Already?" "It has only been 11 minutes of actual fighting."
"They are frightened, ma'am. They have never lost a battle this badly.
They do not know what to do."
Sue walked to her window and looked out at the city lights of Seoul. Somewhere out there, families were sleeping peacefully, not knowing that their sons and daughters had just changed history. "Tell them I will speak tomorrow," she said.
"Let them wait. Let them worry. Let them imagine what comes next." What does come next, ma'am?
Sue was quiet for a long moment.
We do not want to conquer the galaxy. We do not want to destroy them. We just want them to leave us alone. To treat us as equals.
To never again think they can vote away our existence.
And, if they refuse?
Then, we keep fighting until they understand. However long it takes. She turned away from the window and sat down at her desk.
There were more reports to read. More decisions to make.
The war had only just begun. But, already, the galaxy was learning a lesson it would never forget. Humans were not the weak children they had believed. Humans were not the primitive species they had mocked.
Humans were something new. Something dangerous.
Something that had been waiting in the shadows for 200 years, growing stronger with every passing day.
The exile vote had been meant to remove humanity from the galaxy.
Instead, it had unleashed them. And, now the galaxy would learn what that truly meant. 6 months after the Battle of the Boundary Line, the galaxy was falling apart.
Not from invasion. Not from destruction. From something far more frightening. The humans were not conquering worlds. They were not killing civilians.
They were not burning cities or enslaving populations. Instead, they were doing something the Galactic Assembly had never prepared for. They were breaking everything that made the galaxy work. Communication relays went dark across 3 sectors. Supply lines were cut.
Banking systems crashed. Trade routes became too dangerous to travel.
The great machine of galactic civilization was grinding to a halt, piece by piece. High Arbiter Vaughn stood before the emergency session of the Assembly.
The great chamber that once held thousands of delegates was now half empty.
Many species had stopped coming. Some were too afraid. Some had already begun secret talks with Earth.
We must unite, Vaughn pleaded. We must gather our remaining fleets and strike back. If we attack together, they cannot stop us all. A delegate from the Torani Syndicate laughed bitterly. Attack with what? Half our ships are guarding our home systems.
The other half are afraid to leave port.
Every time we send a fleet against them, it disappears.
Then, we build more ships.
With what money? The banking networks are destroyed.
Our economies are crashing. My people are rioting in the streets because food shipments are not arriving.
The Torani delegate shook his head.
The humans are not fighting a war, Arbiter.
They are performing surgery.
They are cutting us apart without ever touching our worlds.
Vaughn slammed his 4 fists on the podium. Then, what do you suggest? Surrender? Beg for mercy from a species we tried to exile? Silence filled the chamber. No one had an answer.
On the neutral world of Vatha, far from the fighting, a secret meeting was taking place. Commander Lee Nari had traveled alone to this world, without guards or weapons. It was a risk, but a calculated one. She sat in a small room, facing Counselor Dren. He was one of the 41 who had voted against exiling Earth. An old creature with gray scales and tired eyes. You should not have come here, Dren said.
If anyone discovers this meeting, I will be executed as a traitor. I know. That is why I came alone.
To show trust.
Trust? Dren laughed weakly. Your people are destroying our civilization.
What trust can there be?
Nari leaned forward. We are not destroying your civilization, Counselor. We are showing you how weak it always was. Your assembly was built on lies. On bullying smaller species.
On pretending that 300 voices speaking together made right into wrong.
And humanity is better? You declared war on the entire galaxy. Yes. Because you gave us no choice. You were going to exile us. Cast us out into the darkness. And, after that? What would have come next? Blockades? Invasions? Genocide? Nari shook her head.
We have studied your history, Counselor.
We know what the assembly does to species it fears. We decided we would not be another victim.
Dren was quiet for a long moment.
What do you want from me? Help us end this war.
Speak to the moderate species.
Build a coalition for peace. If enough voices call for negotiation, the hardliners will have to listen. And, if I do this? What does humanity offer in return? A seat at the table. When this is over, there will be a new order. A new way of doing things. The species that help us now will be remembered.
The species that fight us to the end will also be remembered, but differently. Dren studied her face for a long time.
You are not like other humans I have met. Most of your kind seem so emotional. So chaotic. But, you are cold. Calculating. I am what my people needed me to be. We all are. Nari stood up. You have 1 week to decide, counselor. After that, we move to the next phase of the war. And, I promise you, you do not want to see what that looks like. She left him alone in the room, staring at the wall. On Luminara Prime, the once proud capital of the Galactic Assembly, human soldiers now walk the corridors.
The station had fallen without a fight.
Its defenders had surrendered the moment human ships appeared in orbit.
After what happened at the boundary line, no one wanted to die for politicians. Ambassador Kang Hyun returned to the Great Chamber where he had stood 6 months ago.
The seats were empty now. The lights were dim. The flags of 300 species hung limp and forgotten.
High Arbiter Vaughn was brought before him in chains.
The proud Pelani leader looked broken.
His forearms hung loose at his sides. His eyes were empty.
Ambassador, Vaughn said quietly. I suppose you are here to gloat. Hyun shook his head. No. I am here to explain. Explain what? How you tricked us. How you used our own laws against us. Yes, exactly that.
Hyun walked slowly around the chamber, looking up at the empty seats.
Do you know what the worst part of being human in this galaxy was?
It was not the insults. It was not being called primitive or violent. It was knowing that no matter what we did, no matter how hard we tried, you would never accept us. He turned to face Vaughn.
We joined your assembly 300 years ago hoping for friendship. For partnership.
Instead, we got suspicion and contempt.
We were given the worst trade deals. The smallest voice. The least respect.
And, every year, more species talked about removing us entirely.
So you started a war because your feelings were hurt? No.
We started a war because we saw where this path ended.
We studied your history. The Ven. The Kos. The Mora.
Every young species that threatened the old powers was crushed.
We knew our turn was coming.
The only question was whether we would fight on our terms or yours.
Vaughn stared at him. You planned this for 200 years. Yes.
Every insult, every unfair treaty, every arrogant demand, we smiled and accepted them.
We let you believe we were weak and foolish. And, all the while, we were building. Learning. Preparing. Hyun stepped closer.
Your arrogance made you blind, Arbiter.
You never once asked why humans always accepted your terms. You assumed it was because we had no choice. You never imagined we were waiting. Waiting for what?
For the perfect moment.
For you to give us a reason. The exile vote was exactly what we needed. It gave us legal justification. It united our people. It showed the galaxy that the assembly was not about justice or fairness. It was about power. And, once that was clear, everything else became easy. Vaughn lowered his head.
For the first time, he looked not angry but ashamed.
What happens now? He asked. Now we build something new. Something better.
A galaxy where no species can vote away another species' right to exist. Where power is balanced and laws actually mean something.
And the Pelani? My people? Han considered the question carefully. Your people will survive. You will lose your empire. You will lose your special privileges. But you will have a place in the new order, same as everyone else. No better. No worse. Equality, Vaughn said the word like it tasted bitter. Yes. I know it is a strange concept for you. But you will learn. You will adapt. That is what we have learned about life in this galaxy. Those who adapt, survive. Those who do not, disappear. Han turned and walked toward the exit. At the door, he paused. The war is almost over, Arbiter. Choose carefully what side you want to be on when it ends. He left Vaughn alone in the empty chamber, surrounded by the ghosts of an empire that was already dying. Outside, human ships patrolled the stars. A new age was beginning. And humanity was writing the rules. 3 years had passed since the Exile vote. 3 years of war, of change, of a galaxy learning hard lessons about pride and power. Now, finally, it was ending. The Treaty of Soul was signed aboard the human flagship Horizon, orbiting Earth. Representatives from 289 species gathered in the Great Hall of the ship. Some came willingly, eager for peace. Others came because they had no choice. All of them understood that the galaxy they knew was gone forever. Admiral Parkday stood at the head of the hall, watching the delegates take their seats. His hair had turned white during the war. His face had grown more lines. But his eyes were still sharp, still seeing everything. Commander Lee Nari stood beside him, wearing her dress uniform for the first time in years. She looked uncomfortable in the formal clothes. Strange, is it not, she said quietly. 3 years ago, we were the ones standing alone. Now they come to us. Power changes everything, Day replied. Yesterday's enemies become today's friends when they have no other choice. The ceremony began. One by one, the alien delegates approached the podium and signed the treaty. Some did it quickly, wanting to be done. Others moved slowly, as if the pen weighed 1,000 pounds. A few wept openly as they wrote their names. The Treaty of Soul dissolved the old Galactic Assembly. In its place rose the Interstellar Accord, a new organization built on different principles. Every species had one vote, regardless of size or power. Major decisions required a supermajority to pass. And, most importantly, no species could ever be exiled or removed without their consent. Earth held special status in the new order. Not as rulers. Not as masters. But as guardians. Humanity had veto power over any decision that threatened the fundamental rights of any species. It was a power they hoped never to use. After the signing, Admiral Day stepped onto the observation deck. Earth floated below, blue and green and beautiful. He had not been home in 2 years. He had forgotten how much he missed it. Dr. Yunhana found him there, staring at his planet. She had returned from Kessa 4 shortly after the war began, and had spent the years since working as a cultural advisor, helping humans and aliens understand each other. It is done, she said, joining him at the window. The treaty is signed. The war is over. Is it? Day asked. Wars do not end with signatures. They end when people stop hating each other. That takes generations. Perhaps. But this is a start. They stood in silence for a while, watching Earth turn slowly below. Was it worth it? Hannah finally asked. Everything we did. Everything we became. The lies. The secrets. The killing. Was it worth it? Day thought about the question for a long time. I do not know. I hope so. I hope that 100 years from now, humans and aliens will live together in peace. That children will grow up never knowing what it was like to be afraid of the sky. That is what we fought for. Whether we achieved it, only time will tell. And, if we did not? Then, we try again. That is all anyone can do.
On Earth, Commander Lee Nari visited a memorial in Seoul. It was a simple wall of black stone, carved with 12,347 names. Every human who died in the war was listed there. Soldiers and civilians. Old and young. Famous and forgotten. She placed a bundle of white chrysanthemums at the base of the wall. In Korean tradition, white flowers honored the dead. She had brought enough for everyone. "I am sorry," she said quietly to the names. "I wish there had been another way. I wish we could have one without losing you." The names did not answer. They never did. But Nari came here every week anyway. It was important to remember. Important to never forget the cost of what they had done. An old woman approached and stood beside her. She was small and bent with age, her hair completely white. "My grandson's name is on this wall," the woman said. Choi Hyuk. He was 22 years old. "I am sorry for your loss." "Are you?" The old woman looked up at her with sharp eyes. "You are Commander Lee. I recognize you from the news. You planned this war. You sent my grandson to die." Nari did not look away. "Yes. I did." The old woman studied her face for a long moment. "He believed in what you were doing. He told me before he left that he was proud to serve. That he was fighting for something that mattered. He was right. He was fighting for all of us. For every human who will ever live. His sacrifice helped make that possible." The old woman nodded slowly. "Then, make sure it was not wasted. Build the world he died for. That is the only thing that will give his death meaning." She walked away, leaving Nari alone with the names and the flowers and the weight of 12,000 lives. 10 years after the war ended, the Galactic Academy opened on Luna. It was the first school where humans and aliens learned side by side. Students from across the galaxy came to study science, history, diplomacy, and all the skills needed to build a better future. Cadet O'Mara was one of the first human students. She was 18 years old, born 2 years before the Exile vote. She had grown up during the war, watching the news, hearing the stories, wondering what kind of galaxy she would inherit. Now she walked through the halls of the academy, surrounded by alien faces. Some of them looked at her with curiosity. Some with nervousness. A few with something that might have been fear. A young Pelani student approached her in the common area. His name was Venerable. He was tall and blue-skinned, with 4 arms folded nervously across his chest. "Excuse me," he said in careful common. "You are human, yes?" "Yes. I am Mira. I am Ven. May I ask you something?" "Of course." Ven hesitated, looking around as if afraid someone might hear. "Is it true what they say? That your species planned this war for 200 years? That you knew exactly what would happen?" Mira smiled. It was a calm smile, patient and knowing. The same smile Ambassador Kang Hyun had worn in the Great Chamber on the day of the Exile vote. "We prefer to call it patience," she said. Ven blinked his 4 eyes. "Patience?" "Yes. We watched. We learned. We prepared. And, when the time came, we were ready." She looked at him directly. "That is what humans do, Venerable. We survive. We adapt. We overcome. No matter how long it takes. That is frightening. Maybe. Or maybe it is reassuring. After all, we are on the same side now. Our patience, our planning, our preparation. All of that works for everyone now. Not just for humans." Ven thought about this for a moment. "I suppose that is true. We are allies now. More than allies. We are partners. The first generation to build something truly new. Something that has never existed before." She held out her hand. It was a human gesture, but Ven had seen it before. He reached out with one of his 4 hands and shook hers carefully.
Partners, he repeated. Partners. They walked together toward their first class, human and alien side by side.
Behind them, through the great windows of the academy, the stars stretched out forever. The same stars that had witnessed exile and war, pain and death, fear and hatred.
Now those stars would witness something else. A new beginning. A new hope.
A galaxy learning, slowly and painfully, that different species could live together without one having to dominate the others.
It would not be easy. It would take generations.
There would be setbacks and failures and moments when everything seemed about to fall apart. But humanity had proven that patience and preparation could overcome any obstacle.
Now that lesson belonged to everyone. The galaxy had tried to cast humanity into the void. Instead, humanity had shown them a better way.
And, together, human and alien alike, they would reach for the stars. Not as rulers and subjects.
Not as winners and losers. But as equals. As partners. As one.